Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming to Pages. We are so pleased to have Charles Yu here today with us at Pages, celebrating the publication of his latest novel, Interior Chinatown. First of all, I just want to clear something up. I'm not really sure who the bigger name in the room is, whether it's Charles or his mother, Betty. if you're here for Betty, let's just give it up for Betty. Oh, we're thrilled. This is terrific. But now that we've established that, we are prepared to set up 2 receiving lines when you're done. Those of you who would like Betty to sign your book can sign up one. Copy of it. Kidding aside, we are so honored to have you both here. Interior Chinatown is an amazing book, and it is oh so relevant, and more every day and every week as we all read what's out there and what's being published and by whom, and so we're just thrilled to have you here. This is Charlie's 4th book. His previous works include Third Class Superhero, How to Live Safely in a Science Fictional Universe, and Sorry, Please, Thank You. In his other lives, Charlie is a corporate lawyer and a Hollywood screenwriter, with credits including Westworld and Lodge 49. He's been named one of the best young writers in America by the National Book Foundation, as and appeared quite recently on the Daily Show with Trevor Noah, which is pretty cool indeed. And it doesn't seem that I can pick up a newspaper or a book review and not see something wonderful said about Interior Chinatown. It sounds like we can look forward to more. You've been participating in interviews. Kirkus, which is, for book people, one of the best quoters out there, says that Interior Chinatown is an acid indictment of Asian stereotypes and a parable for outcasts feeling invisible in the fast-moving world. Very apropos. Charlie has been compared to literary greats such as George Saunders and has been championed by the likes of Richard Powers, all of which support the praise for the literary chops of Charles Yu. I don't want to delve too deeply into the topic. I think I'll let you take it from here, but I'm very proud to introduce you to Charles Yu.
Thank you. This is so exciting. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm sorry for those of you that are standing. There are snacks and wine and water, so hopefully that'll mitigate the standing of it all. Thanks to Linda and Pages and the staff, and I met Linda and Casey and other people from this store recently at this bookseller dinner, which I've never gotten to go to, and it just this is the first book where the publisher actually put one of these together, and I got to meet Linda and some of her other staff, and it just reminds you, like, this is really about a community and a conversation, and this is the most rewarding thing. I mean, yes, it's great to be in the paper, or on TV was terrible. I hope I never get to be on TV. But this is like why you do this. I sat in a room alone for like 7 years, and I wrote this thing, and then I threw it away, and I wrote it again, I threw it away, and this was version 3, and so this is like why you do it, to like connect with people and have people read your story, whether they like it or not. I hope you like it. Regardless if you like it, I hope you buy it from Linda, because I think that's very important. And yeah, this book is a little bit of a departure for me. I have written things that people call science fiction or speculative fiction that generally is put under the umbrella of, I guess, not serious literature, I guess. And I don't feel that way. I think there's an easy kind of categorization for that. But I've never felt that I was not just a science fiction writer. I always felt that what I was really trying to do was tell stories, that should appeal to people universally, that are from a very specific point of view. In my case, my parents are from Taiwan, so I was raised as a Taiwanese American. I'm a second generation, depending on how you count it, I'm either a first or second generation American. My parents are naturalized Americans. So I wrote these 3 books, and as Linda said, I was working as a lawyer when I wrote those first 3 books. And when I started this book, I was still working as a lawyer. A lot has changed in my life since I started this book. But I was really looking for a way to tell a story that felt like it was relevant to today, and felt like it was about both, I was sort of looking around saying, feeling like I hadn't yet told a complete story you know. And my parents are, have been here for over 50 years. And they are naturalized American citizens. They've lived most of their lives here in America. My kids are getting older. They're now 12 and 10. They are American citizens born to an American dad and mom. And I think in some ways the inciting incident of what happened was I was trying to write a book about assimilation, what it means to be an American. And then the election happened, and suddenly I felt like it turned everything upside down for me. I felt like questions that I hadn't thought about in the same way became relevant in a different way. And then at the same time, my kids, then a bit younger, started to ask me questions. Like, basically my son was like, "Are we Asian?" Like, I grew up in LA, right? So it's not something I had to think about a lot. And I did get to think about it, but mostly in a very positive, supportive way. As someone who basically does, I only speak one language. Despite my parents' best efforts, I don't really speak any other languages. And despite my own best efforts, it's hard to know what I'm passing on to my children. Like, what do they think they're going to be? What do they think they are? And so it's both sort of a huge, it hurt me, but also feels like an opportunity when my kids start to ask, well, are we fully American? Like, why is Asian the descriptor? Why, when we go to, and we live in Irvine now, so the school is mostly Asian. Like, it's not as if they don't see other Asians around, but they have a real sort of question in front of them, which is this country for us in the same way it is for their white friends, to be honest? Will we ever blend in? They're now 3 generations in, and so this book, in a way, is about that question, I think, and it's about the question of what does an American look like, and like, what is, it really comes from my personal experience growing up in LA as an Asian American who internalized a lot of the stereotypes, who internalized all the TV shows and movies that I watched, and live in this kind of weird mental space where I'm both acutely aware of the fact that I don't totally belong, and yet I only have one home, which is this country, and I really only have one home, which is LA. So that's a very long way of like sort of setting up the book in case you haven't read it. And yeah, I'll just read a little bit from it, and then maybe we can, if there are questions, we can talk about it. Interior Golden Palace. Ever since you were a boy, you've dreamt of being Kung Fu Guy. You are not Kung Fu Guy. You are currently background Oriental male, but you've been practicing. Maybe tomorrow will be the day. Interior Golden Palace. Ever since you were a boy, you've dreamt of being Kung Fu Guy. You are not Kung Fu Guy. You are currently Oriental Guy making a weird face, but you've been practicing. Maybe tomorrow will be the day. Take what you can get. Try to build a life at the margin, made from bit parts. Willis Wu, Asian actor. Skills, Kung Fu. Moderate proficiency. Fluent in accented English. Able to do face of great shame on command. Resume. Disgraced son. Delivery guy. Silent henchman. Caught between 2 worlds. Guy who runs in and gets kicked in the face. Striving immigrant. Generic Asian man. Your mother has played in no particular order. Pretty Oriental flower. Asiatic seductress. Young dragon lady. Slightly less young dragon lady. Restaurant hostess. Girl with the almond eyes. Beautiful maiden number 1. Dead, beautiful bandit number 1. Old Asian woman. Your father has been, at various times, twin dragon, wizened Chinaman, guy in a soiled t-shirt, inscrutable grocery owner in a soiled t-shirt, egg roll cook, young Asian man, Sifu, the mysterious kung fu master, old Asian man, interior golden palace, morning. In the world of black and white, everyone starts out as generic Asian man. Everyone who looks like you, anyway. Unless you're a woman, in which case you start out as pretty Asian woman. You all work at Golden Palace, formerly Jade Palace, formerly Palace of Good Fortune. There's an aquarium in the front and cloudy tanks of rock crabs and 2-pound lobsters crawling over each other in the back. Laminated menus offer the lunch special, which comes with a bowl of fluffy white rice and choice of soup, egg drop or hot and sour. A neon Qingdao sign blinks and buzzes behind the bar in the dimly lit space, a dropped ceiling room with lacquered ornate woodwork or some imitation, everything simmering in a warm, seedy red glow, thrown off by the dollar store paper lanterns, festooned above, many of them darkened by dead moths, the paper yellowing, ripped, curling in on itself. The bar is fully stocked with top shelf spirits up top, middle shelf liquor at eye level, and down at the bottom a happy hour shelf of booze that you will regret. The new thing everyone is excited about is called the lychee margarita teeny, which seems like a lot of flavors. Not that you've had one, they're $14. You wear the uniform, white shirt, black pants, black slipper-like shoes that have no traction. Your haircut is not good, to say the least. Black and white always look good. A lot of it has to do with the light. They're the heroes. They get hero lighting, designed to hit their faces just right. Designed to hit White's face just right, anyway. Someday you want the light to hit your face like that, to look like the hero, or for a moment to actually be the hero. Roles. First, you have to work your way up. Starting from the bottom, it goes 5, background Oriental male. 4, dead Asian man. 3, generic Asian man number 3 / delivery guy. 2, generic Asian man number 2 / waiter. 1, generic Asian man number 1. And then if you make it that far, hardly anyone does, you get stuck at number 1 for a while and hope and pray for the light to find you. And that when it does, you'll have something to say, and when you say that something, it will come out just right, and have everyone in black and white turning their heads saying, wow, who is that? That is not just some generic Asian man. That is a star. Maybe not a real regular star, let's not get crazy. We're talking about Chinatown. But perhaps a very special guest star, which for your people is the ceiling, is the terminal, ultimate, exalted position for any Asian working in this world. The thing that every Oriental male dreams of when he's in the background, trying to blend in. Kung Fu guy. Kung Fu guy is not like the other slots in the hierarchy. There isn't always someone occupying the position, as in whoever the top guy is at any given time, that's the default guy who gets trotted out whenever there's Kung Fu to be done. Only a very special Asian can be worthy of the title. It takes years of dedication and sacrifice, and after all that, only a few have even a slim chance of making it. Despite the odds, you all grew up, training for this and only this. All the scrawny yellow boys up and down the block dreaming the same dream. Thanks. I don't know if there are any questions or if I've bored everyone. There's wine out there. But yes, I love to talk about it. Hi, that's Albert.
Why did you decide to write in a screenplay format? Is it just for the match the subject, and did you find any limitations to that?
Yeah. So in case it's not clear, and if you haven't seen it, the book is technically formatted as a screenplay. And I did not do that just so it would be more easily adaptable for Hollywood, although it wouldn't hurt, I guess. I think this idea came to me because it felt like the metaphor was to play that it's about roles. And it's not just about, generic Asian man as a role. It's, as you might have heard in the book a little bit, it's about black and white. It's about woman versus man. It's about the way that, specifically in the story, it's the way that TV and film kind of tell us who we are. Even though we know that's not reality, we spend so much time absorbing that story, we can't help but incorporate some of that. So as I kind of stumbled on this as the form, I thought to myself, am I really going to write a whole book as a screenplay? Do people want to read that? And I wrestled with it because I wasn't sure if people would want to look at this. It's in Courier font. It's not as pretty as it should be. But it felt like ultimately the form dictated. It had to be this. In order to really do it, I had to sort of commit to the bit and go all the way with it. So that's what I did. Yes.
Chinatown, it's just like a ghetto, right?
Yes.
And enclose the community, and which will influence our feeling of ourselves and our children's feeling of themselves, right?
Exactly.
But gradually, that kind of ghetto should be broken through, right?
Yes.
And this year, the Oscar, there's a Korean film, Parasite, win such a big award and win so much attention. Do you think that could indicate something in this community, that ghetto, that is changing? Or do you think it's just one time?
Right.
Or could you see the trend that in the future our children will have more confidence, will be more like Asian American, will have the chance to move to the center of the stage?
Right.
Could you comment?
It's a great question that leads into a whole bunch of interesting things. I think, it is a ghetto. The Chinatown in this book is not a physical Chinatown. It's a bit of an amalgam of a few places. I did a little bit of research. I have been to Chinatown. I'm not an expert on Chinatown. I'm not a historian. I'm trying to tell a story. It is a mental place as much as it's a physical place in this book. And it is exactly what you said, is that it's the kind of ghetto, not just that I've been put in, but I think more than anything, as you read this book, what Willis, the character, realizes is he's put himself in this ghetto. And I think, just speaking personally, that's something that I've come to realize myself, is I carry as much baggage, if not more, just on the interior, as has been imposed on me externally. I am as guilty of internalizing the stereotypes as I think the outside world has been. I haven't lacked for opportunities. My parents have worked incredibly hard so that I could have basically access to almost anything that someone not born to immigrants would have. So this is as much a journey about the mental ghetto as it is anything. Will my kids, will I do that to them? Will they feel like any sense of internalized difference, or even inferiority because of me? Am I going to give them that? And then you bring up Parasite, which is a great point. I think a couple of things on that. I think Parasite is a South Korean movie. It's an Asian story by an Asian director. My favorite thing that I watched last year by far. It's not an Asian American story, and I think there's a crucial difference there. I think there's no question that there's for me anyway, a huge appetite for good stories regardless of where they come from. This is proof, right? I mean, the Academy voted for it, people love that movie. I think that's really exciting, and it will have a spillover effect, because regardless of whether or not people make the distinction between Asian and Asian American, it can't help to have, suddenly you're looking on stage and you're seeing 20 Asians on the stage. It's sort of an exciting thing, because you remember America is the place where that can happen. that was really inspiring to me. It's like, it's hard to imagine another country where they gave the award to people from a totally different country, you know, the biggest award. So that's really cool to me. I still think that there's room and the need for a specifically Asian American story that talks about, I mean, I'm not selling my book now, but I do think that as great as Parasite was, it wasn't about the issue of what happens to marginalized communities or people of color in America now that we're in a world where it feels like their status as Americans is being questioned. I think that's a different cluster of challenges and questions for me. Yes.
I don't know if you studied the history of the discrimination here in Los Angeles. My cousin Delbert Wong was the first one to buy a house in Silver Lake,
Really?
and they wouldn't let him buy it because he was Chinese, and he sued the real estate company and won the case. He also became the first Chinese American to be a Superior Court judge in the United States. But there was a stereotype back in after World War II where the Chinese could live in Monterey Park, Alhambra, or Hacienda Heights, and it took a while into the Vietnam War where all of a sudden the Chinese could start living in other parts of LA.
What year did he buy that house?
51 or 52.
And
He graduated from Stanford after World War. He served in World War II, went to Stanford, passed law school, and then bought this first house.
and did he win the lawsuit?
What?
Did he win? The
Yeah,
lawsuit?
yeah, he won the lawsuit.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research in this, and it was alarming to find out how recent those laws, the restrictive covenants and other sort of zoning things, were still legal. And even beyond that, I think there was a practical effect of even if it was illegal to discriminate, the landlord wouldn't rent to you or the seller
Right.
wouldn't sell to you. It's part of the idea in calling this interior Chinatown is it is a mental ghetto, it's also a physical ghetto, right? You literally forced a very, physiologically distinct population into little zones and held them apart. And so you have this situation where everybody's been to Chinese restaurant. It feels like an American thing to be in a Chinese restaurant the way it's described here. And yet it's this little island of difference within a larger community. And so that was one of the things, to your point, that I do try to wrestle with in the book is how much of it is about the law, and the law has been used as a weapon against, and then as progress happens, slowly kind of opens the door to go the other way. But it was as much holding marginalized communities down as it was helping, enforce any kind of equality. So, all of which is to say, yeah, it's something that I definitely was conscious of in writing the book.
Have your children read your book yet? Because when you just read it, sounds like a good bedtime story.
Thanks. I think it felt like a backhanded compliment, but I think I'm not the greatest, at reading to them. I tried to do it. They like reading, so I listen to them, but they have not read this yet. I want them to, and they're very excited. I just have been doing this sort of thing, so I think we're going to read it soon.
Have you been inspired by other Asian American authors? Who would they be?
Yes, a lot. I
Not to
think,
put you on the spot. Or
No. Viet Nguyen's book, The Sympathizer, was, I thought, brilliant and powerful, and so it felt like, I don't know how to say this, formerly adventurous. It just felt like he did things that sort of made me realize, oh, this is possible. You can tell the story and people will follow you into such an incredible story. That's who comes to mind right now. Definitely over the years I have been inspired. I recently had an event in Brooklyn with Celeste Aim, who's a huge blockbuster seller, so it's like, yes, she's a great writer. I think what's fascinating about Celeste is she's an incredible storyteller, and yet the first thing you think about when you think of Celeste is not necessarily that she's an Asian American. She's telling stories, the Hulu series based on her second book is about to premiere, I think, pretty soon. So that'll be, I think, even more sort of a platform for her stories. But I think that's, to me, like a real sign of progress, that there's somebody who's just telling stories, happens to be an Asian American, but the subject matter and the whole angle about here's an Asian American writer is not so much present. That's also a function of when you sell like a jillion books, you're just a blockbuster author, which is pretty awesome too. So, hi. Oh, sorry. Yes. Oh. Behind
Right
the
behind
no,
you.
come
Go
back.
ahead. After you. Okay. Do you think you can be prolific, and do you have a lot more on your notes?
Yeah. I will try to be faster, for sure.
Do we have to wait 7 years?
I hope not. For my kids' sake, I hope not too. They basically grew up like not believing I did anything. There's like, Daddy just goes in that room and gets real mad and then comes out and eats dinner. And then we watch TV and go to sleep, and that's basically what happens. So I would like to be faster. I think this book, for a lot of reasons, was hard to write. And I'm hoping now that I've cleared the decks, it won't be 7 years. So, fingers crossed. Hi.
Did you feel, having written science fiction, speculative fiction books, did you feel that you were kind of put in that particular box as an author, and was it hard to write more of a novel that was not necessarily in those genres?
A little bit. I think I put myself a little bit in the box, just wondering, will people follow me from this to that? To the extent I had established, like I had people that had liked my work, would they go, oh, what is this? And I think it's interesting, maybe Linda would have thoughts of this, but I wonder too, like, do people not when I haven't even had sort of like so many books that people go, okay, this is clearly a departure, but I'm willing to go follow this person into this, where it's still like, you hope that you're building the readership. I wonder if booksellers or other people involved in the industry would say, well, you really should have stuck to, a thing where stay in your lane, but ultimately, both my publisher and all the people I've met, booksellers included, they just want the best story you can tell. They want you to write from an authentic place. So I don't have the luxury. This took 7 years. I don't have the luxury of like saying, I'll just wait for the next one. This was going to get published one way or another. So yes.
I have been paying tax in this country for 50 years. And finally, this year, I think I'm American.
This year? Congratulations.
Because, you know what, Ted Lieu, the congressman,
Yes.
He said, you Taiwanese never think you are American. Why? She said, all the Europeans, they come to this country, they all become American. And why you from Taiwan always think you're a foreigner? So that made me think. So I finally, this year, I say, I'm American.
Good. I'm glad.
Plus, I'm from Taiwan. Taiwan, I like to call that Formosa.
Yeah.
Actually, Taiwan is different from Chinese.
Right.
They're Asian. They're Asian. But we are not. We are Pacific Islander. I finally think about this after I practiced anesthesia. I was in that operating room every day for 50 years. And now I'm retired, and finally I can think, oh, no, I'm not. I'm Taiwan, I'm American. I paid 50 years tax to this country.
You're at least.
I wear this.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw it.
Big time.
And then when you are saying Asian, Chinatown or something,
Right.
I say, no, I'm Formosa.
Yeah.
I'm Pacific Islander. I'm different from them. Why you include me into Asian?
Well, they say everyone has a book. I think you have more than one
Right,
book.
right.
Maybe two.
That's what I try to tell you. Your book give me a lot of stimulation. And I'm 80 now. And finally, I think I'm American.
I'm glad to hear it. Yes.
Charlotte,
Yes.
I want you to know that I now put on my applications when they ask what I am. I am Maltese American.
You're in good company.
Yeah.
I am Maltese American, get my parents in.
Excellent. Hi.
Yeah, I'm just curious from a writing standpoint. Sometimes I come up against the fact that, because you said, you want to be aware of your own prejudices, because certainly as a woman too, it's very easy to fall into stereotypes yourself.
Right.
But then there are certain things like for instance, looking at movies since you work in TV, like Hustlers. Well, some people saw it and they're like, oh, this is just exploiting women for sex to tell a story. But it's true that there are women who do exploit sex for a living. And to me, I looked at the movie as something about female friendship and as about, these women who had their own agency.
Yeah.
And it's true that Kung Fu does come from China and geisha culture comes from Japan. And there are certain things that are stereotyped as Asian
Sure.
that come from Asia.
Right.
So I'm just wondering as a writer how when you approach things, you're able to honor those things without stereotyping. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I think it's coming from a place where I have to just assume there's a blind spot. And by definition, I don't know what my blind spot is. I just go in knowing I'm probably not going to be speaking. I can't be speaking for everyone. The best I can do is speak for myself. And so that's hard enough. And then really trusting my editor and my agent, who are the people that read it before, to say, yeah, here are your blind spots. I think that's part of it. I think specifically to your question, it's being okay with contradiction. It's being okay with saying, yeah, I'm going to say one thing, and then other parts you might say, this feels like he's trying to have it both ways, and I think that's okay. I think that's what I'm going through as as a child of immigrants, as a dad, as a husband who's trying to understand and be a good husband to his wife. All of those things, I'm frequently wrong, as I'm reminded by my kids. You know what I mean? I'm wrong all the time, and I'm okay with that. It's basically the short answer. I hope the book makes sense, but it's certainly not going to be anything more than one person's attempt to make sense of a life and a journey of these characters. Thanks for the question. Oh yes. Oh, sorry.
I understand you went to UC Berkeley, and I did as well. I just thought, well, first of all, I want to say I love the book. It's my favorite book of the year so far, and I just want to congratulate you on such a quick read for me. I understand you went to Berkeley, as did I, and I couldn't help but notice that there was a strong resemblance between your story and the story that Asian American history professors were kind of teaching at Berkeley. And I was wondering, whether you were influenced by, did you ever take a class in Asian American Studies?
I took one.
And thank you for bringing to light the story that's been told for generations, but bringing it into the mainstream. I thought that was very powerful that you were able to bring the story to the mainstream. And my second part question is, how big was the SRO room? When I think of SRO, I think of a single occupancy. I was wondering if it was like a 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom. Sorry. Could you answer?
Yes, thanks. I did take a class there. I think I was influenced by the idea of the perpetual foreigner. And as specifically has been applied to Asians and Asian Americans. That was a kind of key concept that has been around for a long time, and this is just another sort of elaboration on that idea in narrative form. The SRO, I imagine, is pretty small. I was thinking no more than 10 by 10. It's a tight, cramped thing. I think people there's a long history of Chinese Americans living in those for a long time. In America, not just in America. Those kinds of buildings exist elsewhere too. But the idea is that they're really trapped in these kind of sort of small spaces. You don't have a lot of room, and so that does things to your, I think, psyche. The only experience I have is that I lived in an SRO in law school. I mean, it was a nice one, I guess, but not really. It was, it was pretty gross, actually. So that's completely different from what these characters are living. I lived there going to law school, knowing that I had opportunity. But it certainly is a weird thing to share a bathroom with 10 strangers. That's not fun. That's sort of that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, yes.
Wait, correct me if I'm wrong. When you talk about self-imposed isolation or stereotyping, and which makes me think that, the way that Dr. Chen was talking about, that why Asian immigrants, don't feel that we are American. I think there are two factors, because by law we are all American citizens.
Right.
So we should be entitled and feel that we are American. But somehow, on the cultural aspects, somehow, we are not quite American.
Right.
So is this some sort of self-isolation or self-stereotyping? And then my John, my son, just as a baby, he's 4 months now.
Yeah.
So he made me this hat, which is written in Taiwanese. It says, hey, Dad, don't talk English to my son. Okay, my son was born here. Okay, I came here in 1977, so I'm here 43 years. So he told me, don't say talk to my son in English. And he also asked her mother-in-law, don't talk English, to her son. Talk Cantonese only.
I see.
So as an activist, language, rehabilitation activist, I start to debate myself. First of all, I don't know why my son asked me, on the positive side, okay, he wanted to preserve his son's identity because he feels that the identity is so strong, so important to himself. And on the other hand, I ask myself, is it a kind of self, stereotyping, or that prevent my grandson to be, assimilated, into the mainstream, so-called mainstream society?
Yeah.
So I'm asking, the question, what is American?
Right.
So lately, I've been thinking about a lot of this, cultural DNA, this kind of concept. Because, as a oppressed people, for my generation, we were oppressed by martial law in Taiwan for 38 years old. So, we come to United States, but still some sort of those, although the law is gone, but, somehow the cultural, those cultural, disadvantage is still there. So, I think it's not only me, maybe many Taiwanese American in my generation, we will be thinking that, well, maybe we suffer for this generation, but for our next generation, we want them to go mainstream, so that they can have a better life.
Right.
So, what do you think of this type of
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm the same generation as John, and so I can say this: there's a feeling of, for me anyway, failure, that I can't teach my kids language. I can barely teach them anything about history, but I can, thanks to my parents and people like you and other people in the room who have given me that. At least I have a sense of what Taiwanese history is and what it meant for this generation to come. But there's a sense in which I very much know that I'm not passing on much to them in that way. Hopefully I'll pass on other things, what it means to be a good person, what it means to be an American, other things, look both ways before you cross the street, But I feel like for me, as a dad, I feel like a real sense of precariousness. I feel like if I get it wrong, something might be lost that's not going to come back. And it's clinging, like that's why I always make sure that, I bring the kids home to see my parents a lot. I mean, among other reasons, I want to see them too, but it's feeling they have connection to the thing, because standing in this generation, I very much feel like a bridge that's just a very thin thread between people that were not born in this country and people that will really, my kids, will never know anything but this country, most likely. And I'm like, I'm not up to that task, but I'm trying real hard to like do what I can to like hold both sides. I don't know, if I had answers, then I wouldn't have written the book. I would have just like said the answers to people. But I think this book, even after writing it, I think it just raises all the questions you're asking. I think that's really what this book is about, is wrestling with all of that and having this conversation and saying, is there something specifically about Asian Americans that makes it harder to assimilate? Or isn't the American dream that literally you can have anything hyphen American, and that's the exact point, is that that's what America was supposed to be, is put something in front of American, and it's exactly the same as American, because that's what we're supposed to be doing. I mean, that's the dream, but it does, the reality is different. So, yes, Mom. I know. I need wine.
We are American here.
I'm just kidding.
I think this better understanding. As long as you feel you're American, we are American. Maybe that's why the action you're taking or whatever. And your superintendent, former superintendent, your former principal, they're all here. And city council women was here.
Yeah.
So this community, I think, do this, maybe more like people like you, start writing more about their story. Maybe that will change to the better society. So if you feel like you're American, then you do something with America.
Yeah.
You do return to the American society.
Yeah.
Don't just take it a privilege, not return to U.S. One thing as a mother, I have one question.
Oh
yeah.
I think we're running out of time.
How in the world you want to be a writer since you're little? Well, I still didn't understand.
Just one question.
She called me up and said, why is it one Betty?
You probably heard my question.
Because a lot of people here want to understand, like superintendent wife and superintendent and then principal, they all say, hey, this is Charlie, Since we were little, we saw him.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, he is a novelist.
Yeah.
Couldn't figure out,
This is turning into like an anxiety nightmare.
Let me try and change the subject here. In talking about different genres of literature, have you thought about writing a children's book?
I have thought about it. I would love to someday. I haven't found it, but what is there a specific? You mean just because it's a great thing to do? Or?
Well, so I grew up in LA, and my parents and I used to go to Pickwick Books on Hollywood Boulevard. It was a great bookstore for anybody who didn't grow up here. And my parents used to guide me to find books in the children's department that were about kids that weren't like me. And so I read a book about the Yangtze River, and I read a book about Yucatan, and I read kids that lived there. And all of a sudden I was just thinking while you were talking about, science fiction and then this, and I'm thinking maybe you might want to think about that. Because kids learn from books. And books can be an adventure for kids, and they get to know people who have different life experiences than they do, and you might want to think about that.
I would love to. I mean, one of my favorite things is reading with my kids, and now they're old enough that I can even talk about them with what it's like to be a writer, and I think it's only a matter of time before they start to try to write things. I'm not saying they'll be writers, but I think they will, because of school especially, they'll have to start writing things, and yeah, that would be a dream. I would love to try to do that. So if anyone has any ideas. I mean, to answer my mom's question, just so just to say it, I feel like it's probably something like, I feel like my dad was probably a philosopher in a previous life. He's a very deep thinker. My mom has a very, my mom has like a very passionate heart. And so I think the combination of those two things, not that they both have both of those things, but that's where I get some version of that. And also, I just didn't like playing outside. So, watched a lot of TV. Now I'm a TV writer. Joanna? Hi.
Is there a favorite line in your book that you wrote where you're like, that's a good one?
No.
I haven't read it, so I'm kind of out of context, but kind of asking, is there one when you were writing it, you thought, oh, this is
I mean, I think there's a line where Willis's mom tells him, you know, he wants to be Kung Fu guy, and he's like, it's the top of the, that's the best he can be, he thinks, and he's like, what else am I supposed to be? And she says, be more. And I think, you know, to me that that tells a sort of universal story. I mean, who hasn't wanted to be more, and who hasn't talked to their parents and had their dreams and wanted to carry their dreams forward for them? So. 2 words. That's the best. Yes.
I have another question that this goes back with my history. My grandmother was born in Bakersfield, California in 1884. Was not allowed to go to high school or any public schools at all.
Wow.
She only spoke Cantonese, never spoke English in her entire life. She died in 1954. But anyhow, she brought Taoism as a religion to my mom and all her kids. She had 8 kids altogether. And one of the things I found as a problem for me growing up in Bakersfield was the fact that we didn't integrate with the churches or any of the religious churches in Bakersfield. And finally, when I started going to high school, I would join the congregation church so I could play on their baseball team. And that all of a sudden got me, you know, to be one of the people, you know, one of the Americans.
Yeah.
But it took a while, you know. And I think that's one of the problems the Chinese had here in America, is that we didn't integrate into any of the Catholic churches or any of the religions here in the United States. And then I think that brought a part of the problem, as I say, in integrating into being an American.
Yeah, you bring up a couple of really interesting points. One, my wife is, depending on how you count it, she's Cantonese. She's Chinese American. Her ancestors came from Canton, and so she is on one side basically 5th generation. So her family has been here a really long time. Both of her grandfathers fought in World War II for the United States. You know, that's how long she's been here, or her family's been here. And at the same time, she was raised. A lot of her childhood spent in Oakland, Chinatown, with her grandmother, speaking only Cantonese, or speaking Toisan, which is, you know, a local dialect. And so that's an example of what you're talking about. A family has been here that long, and yet basically still living in a very small, tight ethnic enclave. I love this idea that you were playing baseball, and that's the thing. I mean, that seemed very cinematic. I feel like somebody should make a movie about that. That's pretty cool. Yes.
So, do you think that the next thing that you write will be a book or for the screen? Because I know you've done television writing as your brother. I mean, hopefully you guys are okay with each other's success and all. Or are you? The better question, or the bigger question is, are you still at the law firm?
No. No. I stopped working as a lawyer when I started writing for TV. So that was 2014, so it's been about 5 years, and it's weird. It's still a little weird. I don't feel like it's totally
It
real.
sounded like it was just last week in a way. I'm like, how's he able to do that, and things, Westworld and all that, but would you think you'll write a book next, or keep writing, or do them concurrently?
I think concurrently. I think the reality is the TV stuff is what pays the bills, and I'm very grateful for that, and I do like it, but a job that you get a paycheck every 7 years is not too sustainable unless it's a very large paycheck. Unfortunately, we're not quite there yet, but yeah. Yes. Okay.
I just caught in your chronology. You started writing this book 7 years ago, and you started writing for TV 5 years ago.
Yes.
So writing TV must have changed this book in some way.
Yeah.
Because it's not a TV show.
I think it gave me, like, not permission, but I felt like I could at least give it a shot. That I knew enough, and at least that the formatting would be somewhat correct, in terms of the screenplay. But I think more than anything, I was steeped in the TV world. Yeah.
My question was about that TV world.
Yes.
Lodge 49 is kind of a cult
Yes.
show, and it seemed so promising, a little slice of SoCal that you don't usually see. And I was very curious whether that role was something that you were expected to represent your culture, particularly when the show first started.
Yeah.
I saw these characters with great actors who were the, I think, Vietnamese
Yes.
donut shop owners. And I thought, this is fantastic. They're going to really do something with these characters. The actors are great. They're such interesting characters. They're going to be part of the surfing story. They're going to be part of the adventure. And then there was nothing.
Yeah.
And it just stopped there. And I thought, what happened? It was
Yeah.
like a big disappointment in an otherwise great show. So I'm wondering, when you're in that kind of a writer's room,
Yeah.
are you expected to write about what you call the average American experience or whatever, or are you expected to represent the Asian American experience?
Not so. I mean, I have never been specifically put in the position where they said, you can only do this. I mean, I certainly, on the positive side, I think people have looked to me, and sometimes that feels weird because it's like, well, I don't want to. I'm not the voice of Asian America. Like, you need a better voice for that. And also, like, it's that would be, I have a very specific experience, and it's however many, 17 million, or however many Asian Americans there are, and from 30 countries. So I think I've been lucky enough to work in rooms where it's much more sort of nuanced than that.
Good.
Yeah, no.
Good to hear.
And yet at the same time, it does feel like sometimes there's an opportunity to say, well, if we are trying to inform this story, can you make sure we're not, getting into a place where we're writing from just, ignorance, or from a place of insensitivity. Like, if you do have cultural sort of knowledge, it can be of help. So it is a tricky thing, because you don't want to feel like you're the Asian in the room, and I have been the only Asian in the room in pretty much every room I've been in, writer's room. But yeah, mostly I think more than the Asian in the room, I've been the book guy. I'm like the novelist in the room. So they're just like, there's the novelist, like, yeah. Yes.
I'd like to read a small passage and then ask a question based off that passage, if that's okay. Okay, so if anyone has the books on page 21, it says, the reality being that they'd lost the plot somewhere along the way. Their once great romance spun into a period piece, into an immigrant family story, and then into a story about two people trying to get by. And it was just that, getting by. Barely and no more, because they'd also, in the way old people often do, slip gently into poverty, also without anyone noticing. That's one of my favorite passages in the novel. And in that passage, there's a feeling of great melancholy. And I'd like to ask how you reconcile feelings of Asian American melancholia with the rewards of assimilation.
That's a good question.
Quite a question.
Yes, that is. I feel like maybe not smart enough to answer that question. Asian American melancholy. I mean, in college I wrote a bunch of poems at Berkeley. I wrote a bunch of poems that you could best describe as like shades of melancholy. Is there something about, from my parents or from some other cultural influence that has carried that tone into my writing? I've also heard from a lot of people on Goodreads that my books tend to be pretty sad. I think that's definitely a flavor of, for better or worse, of like the stuff that I write. Squaring it with assimilation, I think, both through my own personal experience, my family's experience, and other families and people in the community that I know, there's a sense in which success can carry with it a feeling that you're getting further away from, not home, but that you are somehow losing touch with the original, I don't know. It's pulling you away in a way, because success means becoming more this place and less of what you were born. And yet that is true success at the same time. So there's a kind of bittersweetness maybe. I think in terms of the, in terms of money and economics, I think I wanted to write specifically about the fact that, yes, Asian Americans are frequently portrayed in the media as doing well economically, but that is just one slice of the Asian American community. There's certainly plenty of Asian Americans aren't doing well financially, so I wanted, one, to have characters that are struggling, because I think that's a part of, almost any immigrant story you hear, unless they literally came over already wealthy, they struggled at some point. And I think there's a kind of feeling of precariousness if you've made it here by yourself, that you could lose it too. It's different if you had to come here with nothing and you built it yourself and you still don't necessarily feel like you're ever fully accepted, that it could be taken away much more quickly. And so I think there's a sense in which there's stress and anxiety about whether or not, even if you've accomplished, living in a nice place, can you just lose it all? And will it always stay good? Or is there kind of a third act to it where America changes and all of a sudden it's not so good for Asian Americans?
Should we do one more question?
Yeah, maybe one more and then. Hi, yes.
Okay, so you touch on in this book a little bit, and I'd like to hear you talk more about mixed race Asian identity, especially with the main female character in the book,
right.
And how that interacts with stereotypes and the fact that there aren't that many stereotypes to go off of.
Yeah. Yes. I do. Thank you. I don't know. I mean, I think I wanted to tackle I was interested in a couple of things with that character. I was interested in the difference between the Asian American male experience and the Asian American female experience. My wife and I talk about it all the time. I think it's very different. I think it's not symmetrical at all for a number of reasons. But so I wanted someone to have that perspective. I also wanted someone to call Willis out on his own blind spot. That he's got certain kinds of privilege, or he has certain kinds of biases that he doesn't realize he's carrying. There's a sense in which the mixed race character Karen is able to be anything. She can play ethnically ambiguous. So that was my main idea with that role. Was that it's different if you look like this. There's no question sort of what your ethnic heritage is, whether or not you're assimilated or not. And versus when you walk into a room and people are like, Mediterranean, I don't, and so I think that's a different space to occupy that probably carries its own anxieties and carries its own pluses and minuses, is my guess. So without having any personal experience, I wanted to have, a way of talking about that story. Well, thank you. I can stay here, yeah. If you've got books, I'll sign them. Please eat and drink everything out there.